Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I am a food truck business coach and author of Food Truck 101, Beginner to Winner. This podcast is all about helping you start and grow your food truck business. Back when I was a kid in the late 60s, early 70s, I spent most of my school vacations at my grandparents' home in a small area in Kentucky that's known as Printer, Kentucky. And in case you didn't know, that's where I get my country accent. It's kind of mellowed over the years from living in Florida, but it does creep out from time to time. Those Christmas vacations were some of my most favorite memories. One of the chores I got to do was go with my grandfather on Sunday mornings. We would get up early. We would go to a tiny one-room church, and there my grandfather and I would fill up the coal-burning stove, and we were taking out the chill that would be in the church, and we'd do it well before the congregation got there. The best part of doing that little chore was gathering the coal with my grandfather. Back in the holler where my grandparents lived was a railroad track spur that would be full of empty coal cars that were waiting to be filled up at the coal tipple just before hitting the main rail lines and heading off to the power plants and other coal burning factories. When these cars were backed up, they were not always empty, and the workmen that did the work on the rail lines would come through and empty out the little chutes and let the little bits of coal fall out and hit the train track, and they would just leave it there. Occasionally, though, those train tracks would be picked clean, and we would have to take our buckets and walk the dirt roads that led to several other smaller wooden coal mines that were in all the hills that surrounded my grandparents' house. These coal mines were serviced by huge coal trucks, and they would transport the coal from these smaller mines, these smaller wooden mines, to the coal tipple to be loaded onto the train cars and then, of course, being taken off to various parts of the country. Those roads, though, were very old. They were dirt roads, and they were extremely bumpy. And the tendency was to overfill the coal trucks, and there would be lots of coal that would bounce off each side of the coal truck, and there would be plenty for us to fill our buckets. But the challenge was, on one side of the road was a steep hill, so any coal that bounced off that side would just hit the mountain and then bounce back out into the road, where the coal truck would crush it up into dust and little teeny tiny pebbles. The opposite side of the road, because this was a one lane road, led down to a creek bed, and the creek was about 20-ish feet lower than the road bed, and it was fairly steep. So any piece that bounced off on that side, once it hit the dirt road, it tended to roll, and it would roll down towards the creek. So my job would be to skinny down the hill and then pick up the big pieces of coal that I could, and then bring them back up the hill and give them to my grandfather. But there were some challenges there, because each step down that hill could end up with a slip and fall, and you'd end up in the really icy cold water in the creek. Or you might step on a rock that would reveal a snake's den from where they're hibernating for the winter. Or you might just slip and fall into a big patch of briars and get yourself and your hands and your face all cut up. So it was always a little bit of an adventure. The problem was those big hunks of coal would be too large to burn properly. If you know anything about a coal burning stove, they need to be smaller than the palm of your hand, and they burn more efficiently, and they create a lot more heat. So we would have to break up the big hunks, because if they fell off the truck and survived, they would be pretty good sized pieces. And for me, it was just an adventure, just being able to gather the coal along the creek bed, because it really wasn't supposed to play in the creek in the wintertime. There was a whole bunch more work later, because we had to break up those big lumps. It was cold and sometimes snowy, and sometimes the pickings were really slim along the train track, because most folks around our holler would go up and pick the coal off the train track, but they wouldn't be the people that lived as near to the other coal mines as we did. It would be people from basically what you call the other side of the train track would come over and grab the coal. So every once in a while, we would have to go out on a Saturday rather than a Sunday morning. And I would always ask my grandfather, how come we're going out on Saturday? Because, tomorrow's Sunday. And he would say, well, it's going to be raining tomorrow. Or he would say, Billy, we need time to gather more coal because the train track's already been picked clean. I've seen a whole bunch of other people gathering today. And that means that we're going to be left with the coal that's down on the creek. And then he would say the church depends on us for the heat, and then I depend on you to get the coal because I can't get down to the creek as easily as you can. So it would always make me feel good, like I was a hero and helping my grandfather out. But one of the things that me being as young as I was, I always went for the big pieces. And being a kid, I always figured that, bigger is better. And I would absolutely love how my grandfather would just exclaim, Billy, that's such a big piece. It's bigger than you are. I just don't see how such a little feller can grab something so big and bring it up the hill. And of course, that would just make me want to find an even bigger piece the next time I went back down to the creek. So he was always congratulating me and always motivating me without me even realizing it, because he was just treating me the way that you guys should be treating your employees. And then while I was scurrying down the bank to get the next piece of coal, my grandfather would break up the biggest piece I'd brought up and break it into smaller pieces so we would be able to set it afire or set it ablaze when we got back to the church. But what I didn't realize at the time is my grandfather was thinking ahead. He was making sure that his responsibilities to the church congregation was met. He would not only perform the task of gathering the coal, but he thought about the potential scarcity of the coal along the train track, and then he would do whatever it took to make sure he was able to meet his obligations. Remember, I was only there for Christmas break, so he would have to do this duty every single Sunday until April or even May sometimes, because it can get downright cold in those hollers in Kentucky. He always thought ahead, and he didn't allow the weather, he didn't allow the scarcity of his resources to interfere with his responsibilities. He never missed a Sunday heating the church from the time it was built in the 1950s until they upgraded and got into the modern era with forced air heat, and that was in the 80s. And even then, my grandfather went to turn the heat on early so that the church would be warm when everyone else got there. You've got a similar responsibility to your business and to your guests. You have to learn to think ahead and do whatever it takes to be successful. There's not going to be anybody do it for you. All the issues we're having with supplies and all the issues we're having with finding a good location, it's all up to you to figure those things out. Don't stop. There's a solution out there. You just got to go make it happen. Thank you guys so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. Make sure to rate us everywhere that you listen to your podcast, including Spotify. They just recently added a rating system with stars. If you guys are finding all the information helpful to your food truck business, please consider becoming a monthly supporter of the podcast. Just hit the support button or follow the link in the description. Every little bit does help keep us going. If you guys need a business coach, follow the link in the description to my website. I've got a whole bunch of different services available, and you'll find them all affordable to help your food truck reach its full potential. We also have a Facebook group. It's called Food Truck Training. We got a whole bunch of awesome members at every level, from dreamers to beginners to decades old veterans. They all got your back, especially when it comes to helping you get better at your food truck. Thank you guys so much for listening again. Please come back tomorrow, because you know I got plenty more to say about the business.